Good morning and welcome back. My name is James Malonis and I'm the chair of the 2020-2021 Young Professionals Network. And today we are joined by three commercial professionals who are going to talk to you about all things commercial real estate. So please join me in welcoming Zach Hay, Russel Lalovich, and Ashley Polischuik. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, how are you?
Good morning. Good. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. I know this is a different webinar than we've done in the past. We've always talked about residential real estate, but we forgot about commercial. And it wasn't until Ashley kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, James, like we're realtors too. And, commercial real estate is a big part of trades that happen in Ontario. And it was a big miss on our part. So we do apologize, but we are here, better late than never. And I really do want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us this morning and not only educating myself, but the entire province on commercial real estate, why to work with a commercial realtor, and your journey into real estate. So let's start with the introductions. As always, ladies first. Ashley.
Hi, Ashley Polischuik. I am a CCIM broker in Barrie, Simcoe County. I work on a team of three. We're all CCIMs, and my two other partners are SIOR as well. We can talk about that education later. I more so specialize in industrial office leasing in our area. As a team, we generally do everything together. A lot of our stuff is off market. My background is I have a degree in real estate from the University of Guelph. And I've always been in commercial. It was my preferred. As I mentioned before we got on camera, I don't have the emotional capacity to pull the business side and the emotional side out of it. So I've preferred to stay in commercial, and I enjoy it. I started at Barnaky back in 2008 as a research analyst, and have continued from there.
That's an awesome pass. And I want to touch on some few things that you talked about. We'll get into that shortly. Russell.
Morning, guys. My name's Russel Lalovich. I'm from Windsor, Essex. I've been licensed about 10 and a half years. I also primarily do commercial. My father was actually in the business before me. He just passed his 35-year anniversary, primarily commercial as well. We have a third team member who we've been kind of training the last few years. So we have a 3-member team, primarily commercial. Also, I have a background in owning commercial and multifamily personally. So I kind of have some background in going through the process as a buyer as well, and find that helps a lot of times, and people like to have that firsthand experience. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, thanks for being here. And Zach.
Good morning. My name is Zach Hay, also a sales rep in Barrie, same with Ashley, also a CCIM. Similar to Russell, I joined the family business. My dad also just passed his 35-year mark. He'll be happy to hear that. Yeah, I mean, we're a bit of a generalist, focus on, industrial commercial real estate in Barrie. My firm also has a property management arm. We also deal with that and syndication and crowdfunding in real estate. So we do a little bit of everything, but it adds a lot of insight and experience into this world.
Awesome. So it looks like we got some really good, colorful people here to kind of dive into some good topics. And I want to start off, I think everyone who's watching has the same question that I do right now. What is CCIM?
Okay, so CCIM it stands for Certified Commercial Investment Member. It is an internationally recognized designation based out of Chicago. There are 4 core courses you take throughout the process. You can take it anywhere from 6 months to a year based on the offering. I think it's a little bit easier right now because everything's virtual. I did mine in Toronto. They are often offered all over the world. There's another requirement for a portfolio of experience. So you have to do a certain number of commercial transactions, whether it's dollar volume or number of transactions. You put that together in a portfolio. It is sent off to Chicago. It is reviewed. And if they are satisfied with it, you're invited to write a 6-hour comprehensive exam. I wrote mine this year during COVID. Actually, I was supposed to go to Carolina to write the exam in April, but obviously that got canceled, and they offered it in Toronto in April. So it's kind of a big deal. You're recognized anywhere, and it's a great network as well. A lot of the big brokerage houses, I'm sure many of the people on the webinar know now, will like to work with CCIM members because they know that they have that level of expertise. So we do pick up a lot of referral. I'm sure Zach does as well, coming out of the city and other areas, especially corporate rep, when they don't want to drive up the highway. So it's a great network to be involved in.
Awesome. So Ashley and Zach, you're both CCIM certified. Russell, are you as well?
I'm not yet. I'm a candidate. I've done all the courses. To be honest, I just haven't got around to writing the final exam. I've just been too busy working all the time, but that's a regret of mine, but I definitely intend to in the near future.
Well, those are good problems to have that you're busy. So, and then Ashley, you did mention another certification. I believe it started with an S. I didn't have a chance.
SIOR. So SIOR is the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. Again, it's a US-based designation. It's based on dollar volume. So you get this designation literally by walking the walk and talking the talk. You need to be able to prove that you've done it. Usually takes several years because it's a requirement of having a dollar volume amount, and it's based on where you work. I think for Ontario, Central Ontario, there's a certain commission base, and you have to hit that, and then you send in your application again, and they review that portfolio of work. And if you can achieve that and you have that number, it's another designation that's internationally recognized.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. Russell and Zach, both of you take the time to answer this question. Since you guys came through the family business, how are you differentiating yourselves from your father? And that I'm going to use the term older school mentality for commercial, because commercial does tend to be a little more older school, but how are you marketing yourselves to your father's clients, or are you building a new database strictly on your own? You guys can answer, whoever wants to jump in first.
It's a very tough one, because I mean, I literally work 6 feet exactly from my dad. And I answer the phone and people think it's me, or excuse me, think it's him, which can be very difficult to differentiate yourself. And ultimately, you're building off their database for the first while until you can build your own, I believe. I think we'll touch on mentorship in this a little later on and how important it is. I've kind of tried to, quite honestly, we're going to touch back on the CCIM thing. I think it's hugely important to differentiate yourself. My dad doesn't have it. And when the first day I got into this business, he said, "You're going to go get this." And I did, and I did it in 13 months. I traveled to Chicago several times to get it. I wrote in Tampa, and I wanted it, and I did it quickly. So to me, that was a huge thing. And just the secondary education when it comes to that. I mean, you learn a lot coming through OREA to get your ticket, but this is a huge thing. And I truly think if you're going to get into this, it's so important to understand. And that was my biggest differentiator so far.
Awesome. Russell, same question.
Yeah, I would say we kind of have some of the same struggle. You kind of have to somewhat differentiate yourself, because just assuming that you're going to take over your father's network kind of one day, especially say with aging entrepreneurs and stuff, you kind of have to branch out on your own somewhat. I think one thing that I've done, which he wasn't really known for, was utilizing technology and social media and avenues like that, where especially a lot of our competitors locally don't. So I think we've kind of like built a kind of a brand where we're kind of like leading technologically the region for commercial real estate. And that's really been a big driver for us. Also, I kind of like I was touching on how we own some properties personally, and I document some of that stuff and some of what we do, and people kind of like learn, even if they're not in position to to be a participant buying commercial real estate, multifamily, stuff like that. They kind of like take some knowledge here and there, and maybe later in life when they're ready to, they're more in position at that point.
I think that's really smart, considering we live in such a virtual world where people are just looking at YouTube or social media for all their education. And in my market, I can probably say I know 2 realtors who don't even dabble, sell commercial real estate on social media. And I learned a lot about commercial through the summer just by being friends with Ashley on Facebook and watching some of her posts. So it's great that you guys are getting on social and talking about it, versus the world that was commercial 10, 12 years ago, where it was very hush-hush and deals were done. And actually talking about it right now is off-market deals, right? They don't make it to MLS. So let's talk about that. You guys, Ashley, you brought this up, doing deals off-market. How is that? Because in the residential world, off-market, you don't always get the best exposure for your client, but I'm assuming in commercial, you have qualified people who will say, if it goes on MLS, it's tainted.
Not necessarily tainted. You have to remember there's a level of discretion. So a lot of the time when it comes to commercial, some people might not want their competitors to know. Some people will, it might come off as the fact that business is in trouble when really, in fact, it's not. It scares the employees. Like, there's a lot of different reasons things are off market. Last year, I consolidated all the stats, and I think only 51 or 52% of the sales that happened in the Barrie proper market happened on the MLS system. And we had a busy year, like it was a busy year, but I think a lot of it is, it's not so much it's tainted. It's not a matter of it's bad property. Yes, there are key buyers. We do have, and I'm sure these guys do as well, key clients that we will take off market opportunities first, because we know they're buying, we know, they're qualified, they know what they're doing. And we know that if this person wants to sell and they want to keep it quiet, well, we can do that. I did a deal this year, a fairly large group of deals, and none of them were on market. One of them was not even listed. So there's a different level of aspect. And I think a lot of it is discretion. It's not so much being a tainted property.
Russell and Zach, are you guys finding the same thing with discretion in your levels of commercial?
For sure. There's a lot that has to be disclosed when it comes to MLS and that sort of thing, which is, it keeps everybody safe and all that sort of thing. But there's definitely an ease when it comes to off-market deals. They can be sometimes a little more streamlined and are easier to execute sometimes because of that. Ashley touched on a good point when it comes to employees. You have an office building you're deciding you're going to sell. All of a sudden, the tenants' employees are freaking out because they see it on MLS one day when they're looking for a house. So if it's off market, you save a little bit of that stress.
Mm-hmm.
Russell?
Yeah, and I think somewhat, at least from the investment side, a lot of people view investment properties, once they hit the MLS, that they're already picked over. So it's kind of like, oh, the junk kind of makes it to MLS. Stuff never makes it there, sort of thing. So that's
kind of what I was trying to getting at when I was saying about tainted, because I know with some of my residential investors, when they see a property on MLS, they're like, oh, James, I don't want it, right? Because someone's passed on it, maybe it's not the best deal for me. So glad to know the commercial isn't like that. But since we're talking about discretion, do you guys get people to sign non-disclosure agreements?
All the time. Yeah. All the time. We use a system, and personally, we use a build-out system, and it actually has a deals room that you can't access the documents unless you sign a CA. We can customize it. We'll have clients provide us their specific CA that their lawyer has drafted, and it goes in. There's things like environmentals, there's different studies, and a lot of the time it's not just the level of confidentiality and that. The author has to approve that as well. So this could have been 10 years old. Well, we don't have the authorization from that person. So-and-so might not even be in business. So there's certain levels and reasons we have to have that confidentiality. It's not always just numbers.
Yeah, absolutely imperative.
Yeah, that's good to know. Sometimes you forget, when you work in a world like residential, you forget some of the little details that go on behind the scenes. When I first got into real estate, I shared an office with a senior commercial agent. It was 3 of us in a tiny little 10 by 10 office room. And the 2 other guys were both commercial, and their days started so early. By the time I got into the office at 8:30, I thought I was an early person at 8:30. Their days were half done. So what time do your days actually start?
I'm probably the worst. My 2 partners are usually working, one of them at 1 a.m. I don't think she ever sleeps. The other one's here at 7. I personally go to the gym first, so I'm usually coming in around 9, but I tend to work evenings and stay later. But the plus side is that we generally won't work many weekends because our clients aren't working. So we do have that advantage where I know residential realtors, I have friends, they're going 9 to 5, 7 days a week, sometimes 9 full days. We don't have to work weekends often. So we'll trade our mornings to have a Saturday off.
I think that allows for life balance, right?
Yeah. My phone's never off silent, so I mean, it's whenever I'm needed, basically. But 7 o'clock usually things start to get going, and it can go till midnight easily, depending on the day, or it can be quiet. It's very hard. But again, we like our weekends when they're available, for sure.
Yeah, I think we all enjoy a little weekend off here and there, right?
Yes.
So Russell, what made you, other than your dad, I know you said you talked about owning commercial real estate, but what made you want to go into commercial versus residential? And we're going to talk about this with Zach and Ashley as well.
I think with residential, I think it's super competitive, right? It's such a difficult market to kind of break into. There's so like the big teams and all that. I think there's an ability to differentiate yourself a little bit more, maybe with commercial, especially maybe being in a smaller market like we are. And, you know, just like it provides an opportunity to kind of do something different. And I actually had a financial background. Before I got into real estate, I was actually planning to be on Bay Street. I was studying my CFA, stuff like that. I had a change of plans. So I'm pretty good with a spreadsheet and, you know, numbers generally. So commercial just made a lot more sense for me.
Okay, that makes sense. Zach?
Similar story. I mean, I went to school for business. You know, I don't know if my dad actually wanted me to get into the business, quite honestly, and I ended up there. But yeah, my focus was I went to Humber Business School and then to Lakehead University for my business administration. You know, so to me, commercial is very similar in a lot of aspects. Is that, you know, you can analyze the numbers, right? You can't do that with a house for the most part, and houses require somebody who has the vision to be able to say, okay, you need to not decorate or stage, or you know, this room can be done here, you can renovate this. That's not me. I don't have the mind for that, unfortunately. I wish I did. But whereas I can play with a spreadsheet and make the numbers work on an investment much more comfortably. So to me, it was never really a decision. If I was getting into real estate, it was commercial, and if I was going somewhere else, I probably should have been a lawyer or something. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah.
And then Ashley, emotions aside, I know you said you don't have the emotions for residential real estate.
Oh, well, yeah. So like I was always a numbers person like Zach. I was math nerd in high school. I went to Guelph and I actually went into their economics program. And about halfway through the first year, I was just hating it because it was very micro and I didn't like the fact that you couldn't apply it. And two of my roommates in the university were in the real estate program. And I went and saw my counselor and changed into it. And right away, it was instantly able to apply it, able to go through the process. And I just got this feel for it. It was investment, it was mortgaging, it was everything. And the day after I graduated, I started as a research analyst at JJ Barnaky in Waterloo and worked there for a year. But unfortunately for me, I graduated in 2007. So 2008, the market fell out. I ended up back in this area and I did get my real estate license in 2008, did residential, absolutely could not stand doing it, didn't renew my license, got out of real estate and got back in 2014. My partners found me on LinkedIn actually and sent me a message. They wanted someone to come and work and do research, and I've been doing that ever since. I started, because my license had lapsed at the time, I started as an admin executive, got licensed, and then as I got my CCIM and became a broker, I then transitioned into full-time sales.
I like that. I think we can also sum up and say that we found our niches and what works for us, and we ran with it.
Absolutely.
So we've heard this word COVID about 357,000 times since March 2020. How has COVID, and I can't talk about Toronto because I know what the signs look like on the street. How has COVID impacted the commercial market in your areas?
Well, personally, I'm sure Zach can relate here. Our market was, I want to almost say, unaffected. I did an analysis. We actually had the exact same number of commercial transactions 2020 as 2019. I had a lull where our phone didn't ring for probably the first 2 weeks of it back last March. But other than that, it was probably one of our busiest years we've ever had. The transition, obviously, it wasn't as much office and retail because there's a lot of people still sitting in contracts and they haven't, either renewed or they're still deciding, but the industrial market blew up. E-commerce really, I think, pushed that. People needing warehouse space. If you recall, before the pandemic, you had you had Canada Post delivering your Amazon packages. Well, almost every major city now has an Amazon warehouse, there's major retailers that have moved into these areas because just-in-time delivery, they want it the next day, and e-commerce is just going to keep getting bigger. So I think that's what really led to this market being so busy.
Interesting. Russell, what about in your market? Because you said you're Windsor, Essex, correct?
Correct. Yep. Same thing. Record year. Me and Zach were talking about this yesterday. We were working kind of in March, April, May, but we weren't really doing a lot of transactions. It was more kind of like background work. So we really did almost zero for about 2.5 months, but then still ended up with like a record year. So yeah, everything was really busy. Leasing's definitely down. It's tough for companies to make decisions in this time period, obviously. But yeah, like investment wise, like cap rates have just compressed so much. There's so much money chasing good assets out there. So it's if you're a person with a good business, you have good financials. COVID was a good year for you for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how resilient some markets have been. And again, I know office space in Toronto is obviously down with people working from home, but we have seen a lot of new businesses start up in the city. So a lot of old retail space or old commercial space or old warehouse or restaurant space was turned into something new. And BlogTO, Toronto Life, Narcity has posted probably week over week of new restaurants opening in the city. How has the restaurant scene changed in your markets? Have we seen new restaurants come in, or are we seeing just expansion of current restaurants into more space?
I haven't seen that much new in our market, to be honest. We have had some stuff that's opened that was in the works prior to COVID. My understanding, just from reading, online, is that we will likely see over the next year that restaurant model will start to change, where they're going to start getting bigger spaces. They're going to start looking for outdoor patio area. They're going to start looking for, the regular 3,500 print is now going to start getting significantly bigger. But overall in our market, I have not seen a change in the hospitality aspect of it, but I anticipate we will.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, in sidestep a little here into my property management world, I have a couple of restaurant pads and spaces in the portfolio, and mostly they've been quite strong. They've adapted quickly and taken advantage of government grants and that sort of thing. We did have one. It was a restaurant that had been in business for many years. They were one step out the door anyway, and they folded in the first week. They just said, "I don't need this. I'm out." So we were really concerned about re-renting that space, but it has patio space, as Ashley mentioned, and it was picked up in the first week by a new entity, and they've been heavily focused. They're open and operating for takeout, and they're killing it so far. So I mean, it was really encouraging to see, because I mean, the first week when everybody went home, I thought, "Oh, this is the end." I'm gonna have to go find a real job, but it was not the case. It was really surprising. Record years again, but it's been good. I'm really happy to see that.
One point I'll make on the restaurants: a lot of people assume that the restaurants would have a lot of issues, and I do think some of the good operators adapted and are doing really well. But I do think a lot of the government assistance has kind of like pushed them through this period. So I feel like some of the effects of COVID, as it relates to hospitality, haven't really played out because the government stimulus and all that has kind of backstopped them through this period. I think in the next year we'll kind of see what happens. It'll be more indicative of the future.
Yeah, I think a lot of our landlords here too, for the most part. I mean, Zach's a prime example. A lot of the landlords, the smaller ones where the restaurants are, really work with their tenants. And some are really lucky. There's long-standing relationships, and some of them really get it. And I mean, maybe in the smaller markets, I'm sure we have a lot more mom and pop type landlords. So I think that really as well, like Russell said, with the stimulus and working with the landlords, there was a lot that got pushed through, which was good.
I like hearing that. And I think what I want to talk about now is 3 different businesses. And because we've kind of seen the pop-up of the Starbucks on every other street corner, which turned into the pop-up of A&W on every other street corner. And now we're seeing medical marijuana or recreational marijuana shops on every other street corner. So can we talk about that? And I'm not saying just to talk about medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, but all 3: Starbucks, A&W, and marijuana shops. And what has that looked like in your markets? And what do you think the trends are? And why do you think we're seeing so many of the same style of businesses on the east side, the west side of the street? Is it the same way Tim Hortons was in the 90s?
Personally, our market doesn't really have that. So I mean, I can speak to having the cannabis shops. They have been come up. I think almost every major commercial center, node in our city now has one. I know I still have a lot of clients calling on it, but we aren't quite able to place them because of the requirements and distance from schools and daycare. So I think where it's allowed in our city, we're almost saturated. But I mean, we've actually had to start, I think, 2 Starbucks close in Barrie, so we are not getting that same corner pop-up that you guys might be seeing in the city. And I think there's I mean, Zach, I think there's like 2 A&Ws in Barrie, so I don't know if we have that same that you guys are seeing in the city. That might be more, so I might not be able to speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know if we're just behind the trend on that. I mean, we tend to be a little bit behind the city anyway.
Maybe we need to get ahead of it.
Yeah, there you go. The Canada, it was the Wild West there for a while, as everybody knows who have dealt with it. We were getting 30 calls a day on, and I have, at one point, I happened to have one listing that fit the bill, and it was absolutely insane. And it happened to be in one of our buildings. So we actually put an application, didn't get it, it was fine. But, I felt bad for the people trying to find something to create these businesses because it was almost impossible because of all the restrictions. And I think to your point that they're so similar is because of the restrictions and guidelines for them is they have to be so similar. It almost pigeonholes them into what they can be. So
it was the Wild West. I had one gentleman during the lottery process do a $50,000 non-refundable deposit to the landlord just to hold the space, and he didn't get it. But I mean, he was willing to write the check in order to get that space because that's how tight the demand was in our area. And there was a place, I believe there was 2 locations in Barrie where 2 or 3 of the applications in the lottery process both got. So there was 2 or 3 cannabis industry licenses committed to one address. So it was actually quite an interesting battle, and I'm sure you guys saw the same.
Yeah. In our market, there's like dozens of cannabis shops opening. I think they're going to kill each other with competition, and only the strong players are going to make it sort of long term.
I find that so interesting because I can walk down any major neighborhood in the city, from King West to Queen West to Little Portugal to the Distillery, and see 4 or 5 Starbucks, 3 or 4 A&Ws, and a couple cannabis shops, all within a 2-block radius. And you'd think that the owners, like the franchisees or franchisors, would have restrictions on how close you can build to each other. But it's so bizarre seeing how many you could side to side of the street, right? Same thing with the cannabis shops, like on Avenue Road, which is a major artery in the city. And from the highway down to Eglinton, you can probably count 15 cannabis shops. And that's not even 2 blocks.
Wait, I think too, and this is going back to when you're taking some of your CCIM courses, they have, especially with the big guys, years and years and years of data tracking the demographics. And we don't have it as much here in our market. It's very US centric, but a lot of the marketing software and stuff we see has these demographics in the US where you can pull up and you can see exactly how many people are living in that corner and what they buy and how much they like coffee and what kind of coffee they're buying. And we don't have that as much in Toronto, but it's starting to venture because Toronto does mimic a lot of the major US cores. So we're starting to see that data, but it is years and years, and you'll probably continue to see that because they have the data that proves it works based on exactly what you're buying. I mean, we have that little magical thing in our pocket tracking every expense we spend, and that's why they do that, because they know exactly you're going to buy it, and they know that you're going to pass 4 and you're going to notice, and every day you'll probably go into a different one, and people do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Russell, in your neck of the woods, or all 3 of you in general, if someone was to come to, I'm going to say a residential agent, and say, you know what, I want to open a Subway franchise. Can you help me with that? Why, and please get into this, why should those residential agents be referring it to commercial? What are the legalities? What kind of issues do you have? What is that red tape to go through that as a residential agent we might not know?
I can start if you want. I think there's a common misconception. I noticed the very first thing we see is that a lot of people believe or have an understanding of how the Residential Tenancy Act works. So immediately that frame of mind clouds your judgment when you're doing that, because people seem to think they know, and they might know it really, really well, but they don't understand that that does not apply in leasing in commercial. In commercial leasing, landlord is king. The landlord pays nothing, the tenant pays everything. And sometimes, you might get them to write the check, but at the end of the day, you're paying for it. It's just who signs the check. And I had an example yesterday exactly. We had someone who wanted to see a property. I showed them the property. I asked the client if they had an agent, and they said, no, we're not working with someone. Showed the property, and 20 minutes after showing it, his agent calls from Toronto, and he's a residential agent. So he wants to put in an offer, and his first question is, well, what forms do I use? So, I mean, right from the get-go, I knew where this was going. So I personally just said to him finally, because I got an offer, it was not even close to right. I just said to him, I said, why don't you just refer this to me? And I said, I'll give you the referral on it, because, you know, by the time it gets down to it, they don't understand. They don't think, they think that structural, you know, it has to be the landlords. It's not. And I've seen situations where we've had a lease, and it happened in this office, is the request from the tenant was they build a room. So they got a room, but there was no ceiling, because we didn't specify that we wanted a ceiling on that room. We didn't specify that it needed to have HVAC connected. We wanted a room built, but we didn't get those details. And it's a very different situation. There's no control on how much you might get to your renewal, and your rent could go up $4 or $5. So it's a very different market, and people don't seem to see the legalities in it, but it's a long-term contract. And if you get your tenants in something and you're not properly protecting them, you're responsible, and you're not acting in their best interest. And people think it's easy, and it's not.
Yeah, I said this before we got started. Ashley and I were chatting about how I dabbled in a commercial deal when I first was licensed 8 some odd years ago, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had to call my broker of record, and our commercial manager at the time was just like, walk me through this. I ended up referring it out to someone else. I'm like, I thought I could do it, and I knew my lane. Residential is my speed, and my commercial business gets referred out because I want to make sure my clients are represented in the best possible way, and I know I can't do it for them the same way I would not trade in cottage country, because I just can't represent them in that way. We talked about property management briefly, and I don't remember if it was Zach or Russell or both of you deal with it, but can we talk about that? Because I think that's something that is going to become more prominent in our industry, and having realtor representation to do property management the same way that we have in the United States, where we have client representatives. So, or in the luxury market, where you have a representative come in and deal with the situation versus the actual client. So let's talk about that, please.
Well, I mean, property management is a pretty broad thing to talk about, but you know, I love it because every day is different. I'm not as involved in the day-to-day physical asset management anymore. I have people who deal with that for me, so I don't have to go out in the middle of the night to deal with the roof leaks anymore, which is nice. But you know, that's a big nut to crack. But you know, back to Ashley's point about understanding what you're dealing with. You know, a lot of residential they'll hand me offers on the OREA form, which I have my qualms with. One of the first things you should do is always ask, do you have a specific offer to lease form or a master lease agreement? Because if somebody just hands me a OREA form, I'm probably not going to look at it because it doesn't cover the things that need to be covered. The first thing you should do is ask the other rep, do you have a form you want me to use? That is one of my biggest pet peeves, because right on my listings it say, or some of my listings, depending what it is, says we have our own form, and it's a lot more comprehensive than the OREA one is. I've seen so many mistakes on the OREA offer to whatever the short form lease. I don't even use it, but one of the biggest ones, right in the body, it says, you know, the tenant shall offer X amount of dollars annually plus HST. I had a residential agent offer me or put that together, and they included the HST in the number that they put in there. So they offered me 13% more than what we were asking. And like I could have signed it, and somebody would have been very upset, but I don't know, I was a good guy that day, I guess, and said, you made a mistake here. And I don't know, it was just mind blowing to me that it's such a quick mistake. And then he said, well, I had my assistant write it. I thought, oh my goodness. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'd say
that's a big one. Ask for help. Always ask for help. But yeah, when it comes to property management, you got to be so careful with the you know, understanding your lease agreements. So over the years, we bought properties from multiple different landlords. So all of us, so like we have 3 or 4 different lease agreements that we have to deal with our tenants. So you know, somebody say, okay, well, who's responsible for this or what at what point, and then I have to remember what lease they're on. Because on renewals, I try to get them onto mine, but if it's a newer building that we've purchased, they're going to be on somebody else's lease. So I mean, that's kind of where my responsibilities lie. I get the big long paperwork to deal with for the most part. Yeah.
Russell, what about you in property management?
Yeah, I'll touch on the property management. So like commercially, you know, we really try to push for our clients to hire property managers to do everything professionally. You see, like just in like bookkeeping and stuff like that, like as Ashley was talking about how the tenant pays everything. Whenever you have like solid property management, you can kind of present to a tenant like, here's how much everything costs, and like these are all real numbers, and here's kind of what you're getting for being a tenant here. And it's so helpful, and it's so like operationally the building runs so much better. I guess I could touch on property management also from the aspect of apartments. So like personally, the buildings that we own, I have them managed. They deal with rent collection, they deal with any issues with the tenants. You know, there's no deferred maintenance, stuff like that. As you go out in the market and look at different apartment buildings, you can see very quickly like the buildings that are managed well and not managed well. And the property management, the level of property management plays such a factor, for sure.
And one thing that I think is really important to understand is that we don't work at the same pace you guys do. So residential happens super fast, and we have time to slow down and actually review things, because most of the time, like I mentioned, they're working 9 to 5. If you submit an offer at 4 o'clock on a Friday, you're not getting an answer until Monday, maybe Tuesday, depending on who they have to go through in the lines of communication. And the one other aspect I see a lot coming for residential people is that they think that MIT is a negotiable factor. That's not, that's an actual number. And speaking on the leases, I've seen leases where they've done it or they haven't used a realtor, and later on they're asking me to help. You know, they've got some crazy issue, we're helping them with renewal, and there's a little line in that lease that no one caught that says the landlord from time to time can change the rules arbitrarily. Like, it actually will say that, and people don't, because they don't go and ask a question, and they don't think to ask someone to review it. And a lot of time everybody thinks or commercial leasing is easy. I do a lot of renewals with people who are already in a space because they don't know, they don't understand what their rules are, and they think because, oh well, you know, I'm only paying $8 a square foot now, they can't put me up to 10. Well, yeah, they can, but you need to get someone to help you with that, because it's market, it's intelligence, it's having that little bit of extra slow down and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's so foreign to me as a residential agent. Like, I'm sure you saw my face. The fact that the landlords can just go in and change that rule, but you're right. Like, in commercial, landlords are king. In residential, the tenants hold all the cards. And it's a really interesting, you know, unbalance of the two worlds. So I have one more question from myself that I want to ask you guys, and we'll get into the audience questions. I want to talk about mentorship. Whether you were mentored by someone, whether you're mentoring someone, do you guys help new agents get in? And what other mentorship opportunities do you guys do to better yourselves? So floor is open. Whoever wants to answer, please jump in.
You guys can go first.
Personally, I believe mentorship is absolutely key in this market. I mean, especially in the market that I operate in, because there are a core group that deal with the majority of commercial work, and I don't think you could crack into that without it. Personally, you know, you could go to the big guys, you know, the Colliers, the CBREs, that sort of thing, but you're going to be paying through the nose in terms of fees, but you're going to get deal flow, and you're probably going to maybe get some good mentorship there. I don't think you could do this job without it, personally. I've been very lucky that I've had it. I've grown up with it since I was a kid. So, you know, I kind of got a leg up there, but I really think it's absolutely necessary.
Russell?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I got to learn from my dad. Some people call him the doc, like locally. Again, we have very good relationships with a lot of the commercial realtors locally as well. It's usually beneficial for your client to have a good relationship with the cooperating broker, especially in commercial. And I don't know, in our market, we try to be like purveyors of information. Like we do a lot of stats and how-to stuff, and I feel like just educating people just, you know, provides value.
In our market, we have maybe 4 or 5 major commercial groups. And I think my team is the only one that's not a family business. And I was really lucky. I work, like I mentioned, on a team of 3. I mean, we joke because collectively we have over 60 years of commercial experience between the 3 of us. And our team works really well. our senior's been in it for ages. She's been doing this for a really long time. She paved the way, first woman to have the CCI on the SIOR. She's only really ever done commercial. And then she trained the other one, and I've learned from both. And we have one that's really good in contract and one that's really good in getting out and doing the meeting people and bringing in the business. And I prefer to do the research and the marketing and the admin part of it. And how I personally learned was we'd get offers coming in and they put them on the desk and they'd say, finally, Maris, tell me what's wrong with this. How would you better this? And it's always been a group effort almost on everything. And I definitely would not have done it any other way, having someone to work closely with, to ask questions. And they're kind of now letting me, carve my own way and as part of a team, but build my own network and do my own thing and build my own brand, but still having this, reputation and theme and brand behind me is really, really helpful. But I don't think you can do this business without having someone to teach you. Jumping in both feet is going to get you into trouble.
Yeah, I think even residential is the same thing. It's having a mentor, having a coach, having someone to help guide you through. And you can be in the business 10 years or 10 days. Having a mentor is key for everything you do.
Yeah.
So I do want to open up some audience questions here. The first one is, how do you deal with residential realtors trying to do commercial deals and not knowing what to say? I guess we did really talk about that earlier. But do we have any other perspectives on this? So instead of maybe shutting down the residential realtor, are you coaching them through it? Are you asking for a referral? How are you dealing with that situation?
I'm starting to ask for referrals. If I find it that I'm redrafting the entire offer, almost starting from scratch, a lot of the time now showing the property as well, because they're not coming up to do some of them, and not all, there are times when people will say, don't let them know you have a realtor, go up and see it. If you like it, let me know, which I mean is not good practice in anything. But I've started to ask for a referral and push back. And if they say, how do I do this? I'll say, go ask your broker a record or do a referral, because it's not, I don't want to say it's not fair, but to show the property, to receive an offer that you have to completely redo from scratch and then give it back to them, it's frustrating handing away half your lunch money, if you will.
Zach, Russell, are you guys in the same boat or in agreement with that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. You're trying to do what's right for your client. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, especially for us, we're dealing with a lot of out of town cooperating brokers, a lot of GTA, and it ends up being a lot of times like so-and-so's family member. But a lot of times they're the person, that has the best terms or whatever, and it works out best for the seller. So we do try to work with them. Sometimes we have to redraft offers like Ashley's talking about. It's more work for us. It's kind of unfortunate that people, are playing in markets maybe that they're not accredited, to be playing in. But it's a tough one.
I mean, I try to be patient as much as I can, because I remember the first offer I wrote, and I know it was full of mistakes. So, I try to be patient as much as I can and help them and guide them. But, sometimes it just doesn't fly that way, and you have to put a lot of your time into getting it right. And I mean, I care more about representing and taking care of my clients. So I will do what is necessary to make sure it's done properly. And if that means my time, then fine. Referral is definitely a good option. Not always going to happen for you, unfortunately.
Of course.
Yeah.
We have a question here from Jennifer Parsons. Do you have any advice for newer agents trying to break into the commercial market in a market that is smaller and currently dominated by a handful of realtors?
Mentorship.
Yeah.
And if you can align yourself with a team, if you can align yourself with someone, I mean, like I mentioned in ours, I think we have 5 solely commercial brokers. If you can get in with one of them, or start working with someone or ask questions, I would say I agree, it is harder, but I definitely would explore an interview. And there are situations where I know we do have people in our market who aren't based in our market. They go to the CBRE, the Colliers, the big markets, they go through the training process, and then they bring that to the smaller markets, and they hold their brand, their offices are based, but I mean, sometimes you don't necessarily know that market. So mentorship, again, is going to be the way to go through that.
Mm-hmm. Try to get to know those people socially first, get a foundation with them before you go for that big ask of, will you mentor me? Try to make friends with them first. That's what I get people, I get calls a lot saying, will you mentor me? Well, who are you? I don't even know who you are. You know, from my real estate office, you know, I get the calls all the time. Would you take on somebody like me? Well, I don't know you. If I have a bit of a foundation and understand who you are, well, maybe I'll think about working with you. That to me, that's big. It's hard to get to know people socially these days, but you know, there are ways.
Of course, I'm glad you brought that up because we did just get a question from Shahan who said, "Are you open to mentoring someone who's a new agent?" And I think you kind of just briefly touched on that. So I guess get to know people before you ask for mentorship. We have another question here from Alexander Dimitrevic. Is there a specific course that you can recommend to learn more on commercial, as well as would land sale deals be considered commercial? And can you talk more about those?
I think it depends on
the land.
Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, it depends on the land. You know, agriculture is, you know, technically, I don't know, it could be considered commercial depending what the future use is. But it could be strictly a dairy farm, and there are people who specialize in that. Like farms is completely another world that, you know, you definitely have to be experienced in. Yeah, but to that question, yeah, it depends. But yes, absolutely, vacant land can be considered commercial.
Check the official plan. Generally speaking, if you're in an area and you want to know whether or not it's going to be commercial, pull up your zoning, pull up your official plan. A lot of it agriculturally zoned land may be in a secondary plan that you haven't looked at. It might be in the Provincial Places to Grow Act. It's covered in that. That will tell you where it is. The other way you can go is pull up Geo Warehouse, look at the property code. It'll tell you if it's future development, if it's vacant commercial, vacant industrial, all of those things will be slated in there. And generally speaking, if it is slated for residential development, large scale development, that would be considered a commercial sale. And as for the courses, you don't have to be a CCIM member to take the CCIM courses. There are 4 courses plus 2 secondary. So there's an online ethics course and a negotiation training course. And then there's 4 core courses. The first one is financial analysis. The second one is market analysis. Third is user decisions. So that's more based on your leasing. And third is investment analysis. So it's definitely, any of those courses are really helpful. I would say anybody who's interested in getting into commercial should take the first course, the financial analysis, because that is your key component. That is everybody's bottom line. That is what you need to know. So you might not necessarily need to go all the way through the designation, but the CI 101 course is amazing.
Yeah. It'll give you the foundation you need to start to get into this world, unless you've got a really good foundation otherwise, yeah, or somebody to go to.
Awesome. Well, guys, we are nearing the end of our webinar. Ashley, Zach, and Russell, thank you so much on behalf of OREA YPN for joining us today. For those watching, I hope you got some great insight. And if you have missed this webinar or you missed something, don't worry, it has been recorded. It will be shared on OREA's YouTube channel and in OREA's Facebook YPN page. Sorry, that was OREA's YPN Facebook page. And we look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of weeks for our next webinar. Thank you again, guys, so much. Enjoy your day and enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate this.
Here, guys.
Thanks. Okay.